I want to talk about pre-ordering versus renting. Cameras, lights, lenses, any kind of piece of equipment. You can always pre-order something if it's coming out, if it's a new announcement. Like recently we've had the Canon R5, the Sony A7S III. We've got cameras that I personally haven't used but I'd like to use, like the S1H, the Lumix S1H, their full frame mirrorless camera. A lot of these things are really cool, really exciting, especially if you're into photography, video, filmmaking, cinematography, creating content. It's a really exciting time because it's this new wave, this new batch of stuff. And I think it's something that comes around maybe every year, every couple of years of like, should you pre-order? Should you rent? Maybe you stick with what you already have. And first and foremost, if you have equipment that works for your needs and you cannot afford additional resources, additional stuff, don't buy it. Don't pre-order it. Don't rent it. Use what you have to make what you make until you can afford to upgrade or switch gear or whatever that transition looks like. I would never say, hey, put yourself in debt just to have the latest and greatest. I think oftentimes we take it for granted just how incredible technology is, how cheap it is, and it's really easy to look at, equipment from a couple years ago as outdated and kind of old technology. But that, like, movies have been made for decades, right? People have been making content for over a decade on the internet digitally. The stuff we had 10 years ago is awful compared to what we have now. And along that spectrum, things have changed, and pretty significantly. Things like the GH4, even back in the days of the 5D Mark II and Mark III, like, these cameras are incredibly powerful, and you can make beautiful content with a lot of even outdated technology by today's standard. There's even secondhand Red equipment or Alexas that you can find relatively cheap considering what they used to cost when they were brand new. So just keep all that in mind as we talk about pre-ordering and renting, because there's always that underlying context of you don't have to upgrade, you don't have to get the latest and greatest. I personally am guilty of it too, just like the rest of us. Like, we all want the newest stuff because things like 4K 120 or 8K or 12K, these things are enticing for reasons because they're valuable. Better stabilization, better dynamic range, better color science, all of the reasons to upgrade, better autofocus. There's always a reason to upgrade. That's why they make new products, because they're better and they're an improvement and they keep us headed in the right direction. But you don't have to get every generation of camera if what you have already suits your needs. But if you're in the situation where you can afford to and you're looking at getting something new, switching systems, upgrading, whatever it might be, is it better to pre-order or is it better to rent? And I think right now where I'm at currently and where I have been for the past 5 years or so is renting makes a lot more sense for me personally. There are people out there who will pre-order cameras, pre-order lights, microphones, whatever equipment it is. They'll get it day one, shipped to them. They'll pay full price and they'll do the review and they'll send it back. I think that's I don't know that that's right or wrong. I just personally feel uncomfortable doing it. Maybe that's unnecessary. But I just don't like the idea of putting, let's say it's a camera, spending $4,000 to pre-order something, getting it, and something could go wrong. Maybe it's damaged, maybe like my own negligence, I ruin it, I break it. Now I'm on the hook for $4,000 on something that I wasn't really sure that I actually wanted in the first place. I bought it just to review it or just to test it out, and I was always planning to send it back. Let alone the fact that once you buy something and then you send it back, now it's a used product that someone else is then getting, and who knows what you did to the camera. Maybe you got dust on the sensor, maybe there's debris in there that they have to clean out. It just makes extra work for no reason to just order things just if you know you're sending them back. Aside from that, the pressure of ordering something, testing it out, and feeling like, oh, well, I might as well keep it, is the other end of the spectrum, right? Where once you have it, you feel like, oh, well, I can't afford it. Maybe you couldn't really. You were always planning on returning it. You were going to save that $4,000 for something else that you really wanted. But now you bought the thing and you already have it. And yeah, it's not everything you wanted, but like it's still good. So you'll keep it and you don't really want to send it back. And now you're down $4,000 that you weren't initially budgeting. I think those are two easy traps to fall in when you're ordering things just for the sake of testing them, planning on sending them back. I just think it's kind of messy and unnecessary given the fact that you can rent. And that's why I think renting makes a lot more sense. So if we look at it and you look and you see, okay, to pre-order the A7S III, which is a really nice looking camera, everything that you would want from Sony in the A7S, they've added to the A7S III. $3,500. You can pre-order it. It's going to come out in September 24th. That's what it's expected. But to rent the same camera from Lens Rentals, which is who I usually use, it's like $175 for 7 days. You could use that for a project. You could use it just to test. You could use it for really, you don't even have to use the camera, I suppose. $175 in the grand scheme of things compared to $3,500 for the full price, I think is a reasonable amount to spend on a trial run. You don't have to worry about breaking or damaging it because it comes with insurance. You know you're going to send it back. You're on the hook for sending it back. If you love it so much, they do usually have rent to buy programs. So that's the other option there, right? When you're renting it and you go, oh my gosh, I love this, I can't give it back. You could say, hey, I actually want to buy it now. And then you can hand over the full amount. And that's why I think that's a little bit better way to go. Is it kind of an inconvenience to pay for something that you don't get to keep? Could that $175 go towards a lens or go towards a light or go towards a microphone or something else you need? Yeah. Could it go towards meals? Yeah. Could it go towards your rent? Yeah. But there's other things, right, that we spend money on. If you're in an apartment or you're renting your place, you don't own that property either, and you're renting it to use it for a time period, but you don't want the investment of owning it, and because there's just more of a headache that comes along with that. So there's pros and cons to each. I think in the camera world where you can get something for 7 days for $175, that's the equivalent of $3,500 buying it outright, is a really good deal. It's shipped right to you. You open it up. They even like send it with the packing tape to send it back, because that's the thing I always forget is the tape, right? Putting it back in the box, when I send it back, I'm like, oh, I need tape. They even give you the tape. So renting is really, really convenient nowadays. It used to, you'd have to go to, the film supply company down the street, and they only had the really high-end stuff, and everything was just beat up and damaged and not that great because it was just like the local shop. And those places still exist, and they're usually pretty good, actually. They're not that bad, but they can be. Sometimes things can be a little worn and rough around the edges, and they can be that way online too. But I just like the value of being able to test something through renting it, having that feeling of, okay, if I don't actually like it, I'm sending it back. It's not that big of a deal to send it back, but if I end up falling in love with it, I can keep it if I want. That feels a lot better to me, even though I am paying for just like the experience of testing it. That feels better to me than buying a camera, paying the full amount, taking on this huge risk, and then getting it, and then now it's on me, the obligation is me to send it back and make sure the return goes well and that they get the return in the mail. I know that stuff is pretty streamlined nowadays, but it just seems like a huge risk and a huge burden that is maybe not worth it if you're not actually committed to buying the thing. If you are and you want it based on other people's reviews, then yeah, by all means. But the other reason I like testing stuff before I buy it, kind of try before you buy, is because so many of the tests that you'll see online are certain situations that are either stress tests or specific to that person and how they use their equipment, but you might actually use the camera or device in a slightly different way. One thing that comes to mind is the recent talk about the overheating on the Canon R5 and on the Sony A7S III for that matter. Do these cameras overheat? To what degree? Which codec? Which format? If you're using in this scenario, what if you're outside? What if you're inside? There's a lot of talk around them overheating and it being different in different scenarios depending on the person and how they're using the camera. What better way to test it than just to do it yourself? And right now, if you're on the fence because you're hearing people talking about it overheating, why would you want to buy a camera if you're not sure if it's going to work for your situation? Rent it, find out for yourself. In fact, I'm saying this because this is what I'm planning to do. I've put in my rental pre-order for the Canon R5 and for the Sony A7S III because I want to test them for myself. I haven't been shipped these cameras. Canon and Sony didn't reach out to me to say, hey, test out our new camera. We'd love to hear your opinions on it. I can't imagine why. So I want to put my money where my mouth is, test out these cameras to see, do these fit my needs? Because me personally, I don't want to say I shoot different than anybody else, but like I shoot my own unique way and my own style. And you'll see the stress tests where they'll just point a camera and let it record and say, oh, it lasted 30 minutes. Like you can record for 30 minutes and then it overheats. How does that work if you're doing clips and you're recording 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, taking a 2-minute break, starting again, recording 60 seconds, and then another 60 seconds and another 60 seconds, and then you take another half-minute break, and then you're recording for 5 minutes? Like actual production and workflow is a lot more sporadic and random than an isolated hit record for 30 minutes, the camera overheats. So I imagine a lot of people, the way they shoot, they might not have problems. Other people, depending on their projects, they may have the problems. What format are you using, etc. That's why I think it's really valuable for anyone to test these products, especially when they're questionable. No matter what the camera, there's no perfect camera. Everything has its quirks, its strange features and bugs, and it's good to get your own hands on it and see for yourself, going into it knowing what to look out for. If you have 7 days with a rental, you know, okay, in these 7 days, these are the types of things I want to try and accomplish with that time to make sure I actually am invested in this thing, rather than buying it with a pre-order, being really excited or maybe being hesitant or whatever your situation is, and then feeling like, oh, I'm obligated to keep it, or I have to send it back, but that's a huge hassle because I'm traveling and then I'm not going to be able to get to drop off the package. Like, there's just a lot of risk there because it's just more expensive. It's inherently more risky. Can you walk away with, no cost to you? Yeah, you can do that. You can return it, say it didn't work for me, and your bank account stays the same. But for me, it's almost worth the $175 to avoid the hassle and the headache and just go, I'm going to do this kind of the proper way, what I feel like is the proper way, and test it out, see if it fits my needs, and then determine, okay, is this something I want to buy? Is it live up to expectations? Does it exceed expectations? Does it come in under and it's worse? Or maybe there's something that like no one's talking about that is unique to the way you shoot that you can then shine a light on and say, hey everyone, actually we should be talking about this other issue because it's way more important. It really affected me. So that's how I like to look at it. I like to rent the stuff, test it for myself in a situation where online, a lot of times you'll see people using it in ways that make sense for them, but don't always translate to what you want to get out of a camera or the experience. And a lot of times it is more than just the spec sheet of what's on the piece of paper and what comes with the product. It's about the day-to-day use and how it stands up over time. The batteries overheating, because that's like the newest, trend or outrage, that these cameras are prone to overheating. And then other people saying, no, it's not that big of a deal. You're hyping this up and it's no problem at all. It's totally workable. And then other people, myself, falling on the other side saying, it's kind of ridiculous that these things overheat the way they do. But again, I don't have that personal experience yet, so I'm just talking from my kind of initial thoughts and impressions based on what I've seen out there from other people. Would I be able to use a Canon R5 or a Sony a7S III and it work exactly perfectly for my needs? Maybe, but that's why I want to rent them and find out so I can actually test it for myself and I'm not going off of, oh, this is the alpha version, or, oh, they're going to update it with firmware, or once it ships, it'll be slightly different. Like, just get it in my hands, test it out so I can see exactly how this thing looks and feels and functions day to day on real projects, not just, hey, I was shooting some test footage and these are the problems I had, but like put it on an actual project, because that is the kind of throwing it into the fire where if you're testing it out and you say, oh, it overheats or whatever, and this may be a problem. If you're on a shoot and it overheats and it creates a problem for the shoot, you're not going to want to keep the camera because it's going to be such a pain point of like, well, never again. I'm never doing that again or dealing with that problem. Like, send it back. And because it's a rental, you can do that and it's expected. Renting is really cheap. I should also mention just like lenses or anything else that you need to rent. Like, there's so much good stuff that's like really, really affordable considering how much some of this stuff actually costs when you're talking about thousands of dollars on the line and it's like, $50, $100 for 7 days. I mean, that's a long period of time. You can do a lot of shooting in 7 days, and then you just send it back and you're only out a little bit, and it's not a huge burden on your wallet, let alone if you want to buy all these things at the same time to test them, right? If I want to test the Canon R5 and the Sony a7S III, and I want to test the S1H, that's $12,000, give or take, that I would have to go out of pocket to get those cameras in my hand and then have to return all that. And that's a lot to just front, the cost-wise. Whereas renting, much, much cheaper, much more reasonable. And are you out some money at the end of the day? Yeah, but you get the experience. And honestly, those lessons that you learn yourself from the hands-on can be far more valuable than the $100, $200 that it costs to rent it. So just something to keep in mind as we're all looking for the newest, latest, and greatest. Renting is a good option, and I think it's one that should be used more often, whether you're testing cameras or you need them for a specific project. Maybe you already have one camera and you need another, and you can't afford to buy another one because it's a big cost, but you just need it for one project. Go the rental route until you know you can actually pay off the camera with the projects you're getting. Because like I said at the beginning of all this, if you don't have the money, then don't buy it. And you can rent stuff much cheaper to work on projects, to earn money, to where you can build up savings to then buy what you actually want, which oftentimes is the best way to go about it.